You're my friend and he's doing a fantastic job. I'm proud of you. Give me a very powerful hand of yours. Strong guy, by the way. Thanks as well to Director of the NIH, Jay Bhattacharya, Deputy Assistant to the President of Domestic Policy, Dr. Heidi Overton, our Maha moms, and including Jamie Franklin, who's with us today, a very special person, and also the medical experts and professionals who've worked very hard on getting this to happen, this day to come. For long and far too long period of time, America's recommended more childhood vaccines than any peer nation, and even twice as many doses as some European countries, and even more than that. In many cases, we were requiring 72 jabs for our beautiful, healthy, lovely, delicate little children, including giving the hepatitis B shot to infants and newborns on top of many other vaccinations. The hepatitis B shouldn't be given until they're 14 or 15 years old. They were given early. Effective immediately, my administration is recognizing gold standard childhood vaccine recommendations for only 11 core vaccinations against the most serious and dangerous diseases, along with the MMR, which hopefully will be split up. You have the MMR. We want it in 3 separate vaccinations given at separate times. Together, there could be a possibility they're quite lethal, and separately, it looks like they are not at all lethal, but just very effective. So the MMR, we want to have separate visits, separate times. The vaccine being broken into 3 separate single doses, and vaccines being administered in separate visits. For example, at 1 year, you should have 5 separate visits for vaccines rather than getting them all in the same day. And I saw this early on, and I've seen proof of it, where they have a vaccination thing, looks like the size of a bottle of soda, poured into a little child's body. And bad things happen in too many cases, because this is an explosion. This is an epidemic. So at year 1, you should have 5 separate visits for vaccines rather than giving them all in the same day. Very importantly, vaccinations for hepatitis B, COVID-19, and influenza, among others, are no longer recommended for all children. In addition, this executive order directs the Attorney General to advance legal challenges against states that violate children's rights to religious or medical vaccination exemptions, for the exemptions. Other countries with high vaccination rates without mandates for school. Now, what we do is, other countries have very high vaccination rates, and they have not had, and they don't have, it's without mandates for school. Parents can still choose to give their children all of the vaccinations if they wish. It's up to the parents. We're making recommendations that are strong, but it's up to the parents if they wish, and they will be covered by insurance. However, this updated recommendation finally aligns the United States with other advanced and developed nations around the world. More importantly, it aligns us with common sense and knowledge. Decades ago, children received only a small fraction of the vaccines required today. In those times, people were much healthier, and of course, the high rates of autism now observed did not exist. So there's a reason for such epidemic rates of autism, and we're going to bring it back to much closer to where it was. Well, we do not know exactly what the cause is with respect to autism. It is essential to our research efforts that we have the very best vaccine recommendations in the entire world. So we're reducing them. We're changing it to visits over a period of a year and a half, so they get 20% of what they would have gotten in one big shot. A big shot like the size of a large glass of something. This announcement is a major victory for parents' rights, for religious and constitutional rights, and for the gold standard science, and we will continue to do the research and update the recommendations as we learn more. And I think you're going to see some amazing results. I'm breaking it up. It's not only that you're doing fewer vaccines or jabs, as they say, but you're doing them in a series of visits to the doctor, much smaller amounts. To ensure Americans benefit from these recommendations, my administration is fully committed to using every tool at our disposal, including a review of potential funding and finding. Frankly, we're doing funding and we're doing findings. And the findings will be announced almost immediately as we gain some strong surety. So now I'd like to have Bobby say a few words, followed by Jay, Heidi, and Jamie, and then I'll sign the executive order, which I'm very excited about, because I came in and I said, I want to find what's going on with autism. It's many, many times what it used to be years ago, and it gets progressively worse, and we add progressively more and more vaccines. So in a nutshell, and you can see it through this, we're breaking up the vaccines and we're breaking them up into time periods. Okay, not so complicated. And we think we're going to have a tremendous result from doing that. Very simply, large amounts of vaccine, large amounts of, like vats of vaccine, are currently pumped into your child's body. And we're doing 20% of that at each visit. And we'll let time elapse between visits so the body can handle this massive amount of fluid being pumped in. I think it's going to make a big difference. You know, there are some groups that have virtually no problem with autism. And they, you know, I have to say this, they're groups that aren't big into the world of vaccines. So there's something wrong when we see record numbers all the time, every year for years and years. Every year gets higher, higher, higher autism. And we think we have a very good recommendation, and a lot of good things are happening. We're going to be releasing some very detailed paper. Here's another one, European countries versus the United States. Look at that. These are high-level, very medically powerful European countries. You see the top, that little chart says a lot, but that's the difference. So with that, I'd like to have Bobby say a few words, please, and then we'll go to the others. Please, Bobby.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to start by just reinforcing something the President said, which is the source of his concern about this issue. And I'll just give an example. In 1970, the biggest epidemiological study at that time in history was performed. And the university scientists from across this country looked at all the 8-year-olds in Wisconsin, about 900,000 children. And they were looking for autism, and they knew what autism looked like. And they came back with an incident rate of 0.8 per 10,000. So less than 1 in 10,000. The rate, according to CDC today in this country, is 1 in every 31 children. In California, it's 1 in every 19 children, 1 in every 12.5 boys. So there has been a dramatic increase. One of the things that the industry likes to say, one of the talking points, which the press loves to parrot, is, oh, we're just noticing it more. But this is an absurdity, and this is an assertion that has been debunked again and again and again by peer-reviewed literature. But it's also debunked by common sense. Because if we were just noticing it more, we would notice it in older groups. But we're not. We're only noticing it in kids who were born around 1989 or after. The older generations, you're not seeing those increases. So something happened in the mid-90s that changed our children, and it has to be an environmental exposure. Because genes don't cause epidemics. They can provide a vulnerability, but you need an environmental toxin. And what the president has charged us with is finding which one of those exposures or which collection of exposures are causing this epidemic. For decades, I fought for a simple principle. When it comes to the health of our children, government has an obligation to follow the evidence wherever it leads. Tell the American people the truth and give parents the information they need to make informed decisions for their families. Mr. President, you gave us a mandate to do just that. You directed HHS to examine America's childhood vaccine recommendations against the best available science and the practices of other developed nations. We did that work, and on January 5th, HHS and CDC overhauled the childhood immunization schedule, reducing the number of diseases universally recommended for vaccines from 17 to 11, and establishing distinct categories of recommendations based upon the scientific evidence. Our assessment found that the United States recommended more childhood vaccines than any other peer nation. President Trump mentioned the number that's 72 jabs before 18, but it actually could be up to 94 jabs. And nobody else has anything like that. And then many other countries, or most other countries, achieve high vaccination rates through education, informed consent, and public trust rather than mandates. Today, with this executive order, you are building on that work and acting on that evidence. We will preserve access to vaccines, strengthen safety monitoring, expand research, give doctors and parents better information, and restore informed consent and parental choice to their rightful place in American medicine. At HHS, we are already moving across multiple agencies: FDA, CDC, NIH, ARPA-H, NTP, the National Toxicity Program, and other parts of the department. We have already launched unprecedented research effort examining vaccine safety and long-term health outcomes in American children. We are putting some of the largest health data sets in the country to work, including CDC's Vaccine Safety Data Link, FDA's BEST systems, and other major federal and private health data sources. We're pursuing dozens of studies and analyses. We are comparing health outcomes in vaccinated versus unvaccinated children. We're examining aluminum adjuvants, the timing of the hepatitis B vaccine, vaccines administered during pregnancy, and outcomes ranging from allergies to autoimmune disease to autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders. At NIH, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences are working with the National Toxicity Program on a comprehensive review of vaccine adjuvants, ingredients that are added to vaccines to amplify the body's immune response. They will determine what the existing science establishes and where uncertainty remains and where we need additional research. We're bringing that same determination to autism. NIH has launched the Autism Data Science Initiative with 13 research awards examining autism prevalence, causes, treatments, and services. 5 of these will include vaccines among the potential factors that they examine. Dr. Bhattacharya will discuss that work in greater detail. Next month, ARPA-H is preparing a major new initiative focused on foundational causes and biology of autism and on better diagnostics, treatments, technologies, and tools for people with autism and their families. We will examine every biologically plausible hypothesis and leave no legitimate scientific question unexplored. Mr. President, you have told us that you want answers, so do I. We have just over 2 years to finish the work, and I know you're impatient, and we are moving with urgency that deadline demands. We will bring you actions and findings as soon as they are ready. We will not wait for the 90-day period, and within 90 days, as you have directed, we will deliver the full response required by this executive order. Our task force on safer childhood vaccines was established by Congress in 1986, but went dormant in 1998. Last year, after nearly 3 decades, this administration reinstated it as required by the statute, and yet it was discontinued. And you restored that congressional mandate. The task force is already working to expand vaccine options, examine the timing and sequencing of childhood vaccines, strengthen safety monitoring, advance research into alternative adjuvants, and continuously evaluate risks and benefits using American and international evidence. Taken together, this is what gold standard science means. No predetermined answers, no institutional taboos, no sacred cows, no hiding uncertainty. Test the hypothesis, examine the data, replicate the results, tell the public what we find, be honest. This is the standard you have set for this administration. It's the standard I intend to enforce at HHS, Mr. President. You asked us to get this done, and we are getting it done. And we will keep working with urgency until American parents can have confidence on the medical advice that their government gives them is worthy of their trust. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bobby. And Jay, please.
We have been watching President Trump speak about childhood vaccine recommendations. Now, a draft of an executive order he is signing, obtained by CBS News, said there should be a more limited number of vaccines recommended for children. And it directs the Health and Human Services Department to reassess vaccine sequencing and timing within 90 days. So the executive order is called Gold Standard Childhood Vaccine Recommendations. It would divide childhood vaccines into 3 distinct categories. Immunizations recommended for all children, so that includes measles, mumps, rubella, tetanus, polio, HPV. Then there's another category, immunizations recommended for certain high-risk groups, which includes RSV, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, and then immunizations based on shared clinical decision-making, Hep A, Hep B, rotavirus, influenza, and COVID-19. Now, the order does 3 things. First, it says it educates states to harmonize their policies with an HHS finding that America's schedule is too crowded, more crowded compared with the schedule of Europe and Asia. Second, it says that it needs to produce a report that includes ways the commercial sector can produce individual MMR shots. So spacing out the shots, not just doing measles and then a separate visit for mumps and then a separate visit for rubella. And then third, it directs the DOJ to investigate whether states are in violation of parental authority, religious freedom, disability accommodations, and religious and medical exemptions. Now, it is important to note the American Academy of Pediatrics says researchers have studied a link between vaccines and autism and investigated it thoroughly and found no link. They also say there is robust evidence to support the safety, effectiveness, and necessity of U.S. vaccine recommendations. And they actually point to the claim that a combined MMR shot is not as safe as separate vaccines, calling it misleading, and saying that individual vaccines haven't been available and were phased out of production in 2009, and that the MMR vaccine reduces the number of doctor's visits and shots required for children to be fully protected. Let's go ahead now and go to CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder, who has also been listening. Doctor, give us your thoughts on this order.
Right. So I think you did a great job of summarizing the top line, Lindsay. But I think a few things I want to focus in on. So first of all, is splitting up the MMR vaccine even possible? Merck stopped producing the standalone measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines in 2009. There is no currently licensed version in this country. No company has said it's building one, and the order only takes effect once those products exist. Mumps vaccination fell in Japan when it split up its vaccine in the 1990s to about 1/3 of kids. And doctors documented hundreds of kids in Japan who lost their hearing as a result of mumps infection. One of the other things that was brought up here was spacing shots out. A lot of parents think that's gentler. Well, I don't know if I would agree with that. It means you have that many more injections, but about 4 in 10 parents believe that spacing shots out is a gentler approach. Researchers in Oregon followed almost 100,000 children to see how this worked out. And the ones whose parents spread the shots out more made more trips to the doctor and got fewer vaccines. So every extra visit is one somebody has to take time off work for or away from other activities. Finally, what should parents do based on what we're hearing now? As of right now, this does not change the vaccination recommendations out of the CDC. A federal judge blocked the last attempt to cut the schedule back in March, and that ruling currently stands. So your pediatrician is still working from the same schedule as yesterday. And if you're unsure, ask your pediatrician which shots your child is due for and why.
I think it's also important, Doctor, to mention that there's no evidence showing this causality right now, if you can sort of jump into the science behind that. But even just having an announcement like this an event like this, an executive order like this, changing a policy like this, it could lead people to thinking otherwise, to thinking that these vaccines are not safe for their children.
And this is a very real concern. I want to be very clear. Vaccines do not cause autism. This has been tested in more than 1 million kids across multiple countries and decades. No study has found an increased risk. And, right now, I think we have to unfortunately turn to institutions like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the National Academies, the Infectious Diseases Society of America, and others in the absence of real scientific leadership at the CDC. Some of the evidence I can cite for this. So there's a Danish study that looked at over 600,000 children and found that the autism rate in vaccinated kids was, if anything, lower than in unvaccinated kids. There was also an analysis looking at 1.25 million children, finding no association between vaccines and autism, and none for MMR or thimerosal, which is a mercury-based preservative, no association with autism. There's also been a study of almost 100,000 American kids, which included nearly 2,000 who had an older sibling with autism. If a vaccine triggered autism in a genetically vulnerable child, this is where you would see that risk play out. The risk in the younger sibling was no higher. We took thimerosal, the mercury preservative, out of routine childhood vaccines around 2000. In California, the autism diagnoses kept rising every single quarter for the next 6 years. If thimerosal were the cause, the rates should have fallen, and they did not. And then finally, in 2004, the Institute of Medicine concluded that the evidence favors rejection of a causal relationship between the MMR vaccine and autism.
The Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is not a doctor. He's not a scientist. He's an environmental lawyer. But he is at the forefront of this Make America Healthy Again movement. There are a lot of people who are looking to him to get preservatives out of our food, dyes out of our food, to make food healthier, to remove some of these environmental factors. He had just mentioned something happened around 1989 where these rates started increasing. There must be some kind of environmental toxin or group of toxins. Has this already been studied? Is it worth looking at this more carefully? I don't want to completely, people who are concerned and who are listening to this, and it's hitting on something that they believe in, that they think, not to discount that, but also what has been proven already and what should we be investing in?
And look, I understand the concern. We do need to get to the bottom of why we are seeing increasing rates. The estimates are that about 80% of the increase we've seen is attributable to better diagnosis, but there is still some proportion of that may be not just better diagnosis, but other factors. The challenge here is you cannot prove a negative. You cannot prove, for example, that God does not exist. Similarly, you cannot prove with 100% certainty that vaccines do not cause autism. However, with all of the evidence we have, I feel very confident in saying that you do not have to worry about that risk. Now, there is a lot of research that needs to be done on what causes autism, how to better help families who have children with autism. How do you potentially treat or prevent autism? Some of the understudied potential risk factors include genetics, which we think is by far and away the most important predictor here. Other factors like, for example, advanced paternal age, the advanced age of a father at the time that he and his partner conceive. Some of the other evidence here that I also hadn't cited yet, in 2013, the Institute of Medicine, which was actually a study or a report that Secretary Kennedy cited in his interview with Dana Bash on CNN about a week ago, he misquoted that 2013 Institute of Medicine review found 32 different studies on immunization and developmental disorders. Also found no evidence that the childhood vaccination schedule in this country is unsafe. And that same report also says that running placebo-controlled randomized clinical trials of vaccines at this stage would be unethical, because then you would be randomizing a child to no vaccines, knowingly understanding that you would be leaving them unprotected against infections like measles and whooping cough.
The president often says that the USA schedule is too long, that there are too many vaccines. The secretary said the word 94, that some kids are getting 94 jabs. Now, it's important to note that a lot of what's included in the numbers that they're giving include annual influenza, annual COVID-19 shots. And I don't know the exact number. You can tell me what the average number is if you have that stat. But he often compares, as this executive order does, our doses and dosing schedule to European countries. Why is that?
Well, that's actually misleading. Denmark, which is the country that President Trump and Secretary Kennedy repeatedly compare the U.S. Childhood vaccination schedule to, Denmark is the outlier. Denmark covers 10 different infectious diseases. The average across 38 different countries is 14. South Korea and Brazil cover 18, Greece 17. We are at about 17 or 18, depending on how you interpret. And the Danish scientists have actually said they need to be covering more vaccines, recommending more vaccines, including, for example, hepatitis B.
Overall, for anybody who might just be joining us, who is listening, and they'll see the headlines about, an updated vaccine schedule and new recommendations, new guidelines, what is your top line for parents?
I think the top line here is that vaccines do not cause autism. There has been, this is one of the most tested questions in all of medicine. There are other potential risk factors or causes of autism that have not been adequately studied. And really, that's where we should be focusing taxpayer money if we want a real answer to the question of why are we seeing an increase in autism diagnoses.
Okay. Dr. Celine Gounder, thank you so much. For now, we are going to keep monitoring what is happening here in the Oval Office. And if the president starts to take questions, we will bring you back here. But for now, we are going to take a quick break. You're watching CBS News 24/7.
Hi, everybody. I'm Nora O'Donnell, and I want to tell you about my new podcast, Healthful. Every week, I bring you the latest science, Dr. Brem, myth-busting, and trusted medical expertise
Perimenopause is hormonal chaos. We have biology to help you not suffer.
to help you improve your health, your happiness. This is like such an aha moment, and just to improve your life. I think talking about this is so incredibly important. Healthful, a new CBS News podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
One of the best compliments we can ever get comes from you, the